Hey everybody, my name is Lee Gaines and welcome to Tipsy Gardening. Today on Tipsy, we are going to be getting a little shady by giving you some tips on establishing a shade garden in your yard. The first thing you're going to want to establish with your shade garden is, where is your shade? So I would recommend going to your hardware store, garden center, wherever, and getting you some of these little flags. And you're going to want to make note of 3 different times a day. Morning sun, midday sun, and late afternoon sun. And you're going to want to use these flags to establish where are the areas where you're just never getting full sun. Now you do want a little bit of light, so if you get like 2 hours of either afternoon or morning sun, that's actually going to be pretty good for most shade-loving plants because they want a little bit. Or in the case of your canopy, if you're getting dappled light throughout the day, that's also great. Full darkness shade, it's a very small number of plants that are going to do well, and grass is not one of them. As you'll notice, we've actually extended our mulch lines here. They used to be much further back, but the grass just was not thriving here because we have a low plot tree, and because we have a low plot tree, we are never going to have an amazing amount of grass here. But it's actually doing a little better right now because we trimmed it up recently, the low plot tree. And so we're getting a little more afternoon sun here, which is why these giant spider lilies are going to do really well here. So the giant spider lily, as its name implies, will get quite huge, like 6 feet tall, 6 feet across, beautiful white blooms. But they're not there yet. They're quite immature. We will probably get some blooms out of these this year, but you know, it's going to be quite some time until they get to be truly giant. In the meantime, we filled in our mulch bed with some potted plants because these are not permanent. Why are they not permanent? Because these are going to get huge. So these are just kind of doing a temporary job of filling in, which is another thing to consider when making your planting decisions in terms of putting things in containers or putting things in the ground. Big things you're always going to want to put in the ground, obviously, or you know, keep upgrading to a bigger container. But in the case of potted plants, they're a great way to fill in an area where you have like plants that will mature but aren't there yet. Some good solutions for your shade garden are the Never Never plant. It gives you that nice variegated green, beautiful broad leaves, easy to maintain, great Florida solution. If you want that feeling of flowers without actually having flowers, you can't go wrong with caladiums. Caladiums are a bulb. They will die back in the winter, they will come back in the spring, and they will give you color in your shade garden in spring and summer. As you can see, goodness, there's so many different colors that they come in, with the pinks, the reds, the greens, the spotted, the solid. They're one of those plants that you can't almost tell the difference between the artificial and the real because they just look so surreal. They look like they were like ran across a photocopier. The graininess to the speckling is amazing. Again, a nice pop of color in an area where you couldn't think you could have color because it's shady and you can't do flowers. So caladiums, there you go. Another great shade solution is, of course, the philodendron. It's a wonderful subtropical, likes some moisture, likes dappled sun. This area is like right on the line between getting some afternoon sun, otherwise just a lot of dappled light throughout the day because we have a low plot tree above us here. We've got the croton over here. Above the croton, we have another canopy of a golden shower tree. So this area is predominantly pretty shady with some dappled light, which is why the grass is not so amazing, which is why we actually moved our deadline where we were trying to go grass, and we gave up. Okay, we just gave up. We're in grass here. Another shade-loving plant is the cordyline. That one back there is a tricolored, also known as a tie plant, that has the pink and the green and the light green, and it gets just a little bit of dappled light throughout the day and a wee bit of morning sun, and it's doing really well. So that is another shady solution for your shade garden. Another plant that does really well in the shade is a spider plant. So whether you're hanging it or planting it directly in the ground, it adds that little pop of color with that green variegation. Just note that when these little spiders creep out to your yard and they touch the ground, they're going to start up a new plant. So it will spread. So if you want something that's going to spread, this guy is a winner here. Well, you can't talk about shade gardening without talking about unexpected consequences. This right here is a huge Norfolk Island pine. And far too many times, people see these sweet little trees in their garden center during the holidays. And they think, oh, instead of getting a dead, cut tree, we'll get a growing tree and then we'll plant it in the yard after Christmas. It'll be awesome. Don't do it, bro. Just don't do it. Highly recommend against it. I have nightmares about this tree during hurricane season because it is so big. I mean, look at the trunk. Anyway, it's here. It's not going anywhere without a whole lot of money and permits happening. So we used to have bromeliads underneath here. And funny thing about bromeliads is, they have those very sharp ridges, and they would get filled with the needles from the tree, like this, in the hundreds. And there's only one way to get them out, and that is with your hands. And even with gloves, even with a long sleeve shirt, you're gonna look like you tried to commit suicide because you're just gonna be covered in cuts and scratches. So again, don't do it. But if you did do it, don't plant bromeliads underneath it. Go with something a little softer. So in our case, we put in recently, actually, after ripping one time now, we removed the bromeliads we had to another spot in the garden and filled this in with more softer plants, including some hostas, including some peperoma, and in some adantium, which is in the fern family. We actually recycled some various building materials to create a little retainer wall to kind of build this up. And after doing that, it makes it a lot easier to just kind of fish out the needles as they drop, and makes it a lot easier to maintain, a lot less deadly to maintain. But again, if you're in the garden center and you see that Norfolk Island pine, just keep walking. We hope you found these gardening tips helpful, and we also hope that you'll consider following and subscribing to us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, where we'll be sharing more Florida gardening tips, the occasional cocktail, and every once in a while I just might bake something and share that recipe too. So be sure to smash that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the garden.